All right, we're going to move on then to Pecan Fertility. And this is Amanda McWhirter put together this presentation. I get a lot of questions about pecan fertility. Pecans do have to be fertilized every year. Growth of a pecan, it dictates the crop that's going to be produced the following year. The normal rate of growth is about 5 to 10 inches per year for a mature tree. For non-bearing younger trees, that's about 24 inches per year. So they definitely need some nutrients put back so they can keep up with all the growth they need to put on for the year. How much you put out depends on a lot of different variables. It could be the soil, the nutrient status, and the varieties. But Amanda put together sort of a general rule of thumb. So for nitrogen, you want to put out about 100 to 150 pounds per year in bearing years. If it is an off year, you can get away with putting 50 to 75, or if you have a light crop. She likes to recommend, and I think it is best, to do a split application. So do one in mid-spring and then one in the summer. Normal crop, you would go out in April with about 50 to 70 pounds. In August, you would do about the same amount. And I guess you would probably base that off of the year before. It's hard to predict if you're going to have a normal crop this time of year. It's a lot easier once the nutlets have formed. You get a better idea. So if you're going to have a heavy crop, which you'll be able to tell definitely by August, you could split it 50, 50, 50. One thing that is really important is keeping a herbicide strip, not only for the competition that the weeds the weeds give to the trees for water and nutrients, but also to put out your fertilizer banded along this strip. You can get away with putting out a lot less fertilizer if you have this weed-free zone than if you're broadcasting it just all over the place. She recommends 3200 for the spring application and ammonium nitrate for the summer. And also legume cover crops in the row middles because they can give you a little bit of a nitrogen boost. And this is just an example of a directed fertilizer application. You want to band it about halfway between the trunk and the drip line of the tree. And then there's the spreader applying it. Another thing you want to talk to growers about is putting out phosphorus at planting. They need to put out about 60 to 100 pounds per acre, and they need to put out subsequent applications as needed. You need to make these applications based on the leaf phosphorus levels. And we do leaf testing in July, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. But if those leaf phosphorus levels fall below 0.12%, then you'll definitely want to recommend that they put out phosphorus. It can show up as leaf scorch about 7 to 10 days before shuck split, or defoliation in heavy bearing types. And I've seen that happen here in Arkansas. Adequate phosphorus also helps reduce alternate bearing. Potassium is another nutrient that is important. It should be maintained at 2 to 1. This deficiency can appear after heavy nitrogen applications. Desirable and Schley are very sensitive to an NK imbalance. And you can see the hallmark trait of that is scorching right there by the petiole. Potassium deficiencies can cause premature defoliation, shoot dieback, and poorly filled nuts. And kernel fill is indicative of a lot of different deficiencies. So potassium is one. Another one is not irrigating enough. That can also cause poor kernel fill. So if you get that question about poor kernel fill, make sure you ask about potassium. So these rates should be based on leaf potassium amounts that are seen whenever leaf analysis is done. So she recommends 50 to 100 pounds of potassium in late February, early March. Potash is a common one that's applied, or potassium nitrate as a foliar spray. Zinc is very important. Soil applications, honestly, are not very effective. In a homeowner type situation, I think that's a fine recommendation. But if they have a high pH soil, it's not going to do much because it just is bound up in the soil. I would never recommend that in a commercial situation. Foliar applications are the norm, and they can be tank mixed with your pecan scab sprays. There's rapid plant uptake. The standardized schedule is the first application you want to put out 2 weeks after bud break. The next one you want to do 2 weeks later whenever you have shoot elongation. And the tips of the new leaves, they're going to rapidly absorb that zinc. By early June, those leaves are fully grown, and you will not need any more zinc applications. The recommended rate is 2 pounds per 100 gallon of water. And those, like I said, those applications, generally you're going to put about 3 out a year. But depending on what your leaf analysis comes back, you may need up to 5. For homeowners, 2 teaspoons per gallon of water. You have to be careful with zinc sulfate. You can get some plant burn. So just if they get it too hot, they're going to get some injury. There's much better absorption when the leaves are wet and we have high humidity. And then if they spray it when it's real dry, even at the recommended rate, you could see a little bit of burn. So for young trees at transplant, fertilizer would be 0. Year 1, we're going to have 2 to 4 feet of terminal growth. You want to do about 1 pound of 5, 10, 15, or 10, 10, 10 per tree. And then if trees are in their second year, you're going to do 10, 10, 10 in March, May, or June. And then you're going to start your zinc applications in year 2 as well. And then you can see year 3, you're going to bump that up to 4 pounds. And then you're going to also do your zinc sulfate applications as well. Something to note, you would think everyone would know this, but they do not. Do not place fertilizer within 12 inches of the trunk. It will cause damage, especially to those young trees that don't have well-formed bark. So plant tissue nutrient sampling, soil testing is important, but for pecans, we really recommend looking at our plant tissues and having them tested. And what you will do is take the middle leaflets outlined in yellow and collect 100 pairs from that orchard or from that general area. I know a lot of farmers have orchards in different locations, but it would have to be per location. In July, it has to be done in July to calculate the fertilizer rates for the next year. And this is just an example of the form. And then also some information. If you've had a recent zinc spray, make sure those leaves are wiped clean, and make sure to recommend that to growers, because sometimes they'll forget if they've sprayed some zinc. They shouldn't be spraying it that late, but if they've had any type of pesticide spray, make sure that they're wiping those leaves clean before they send them in. It's best to tell them to sample on a Monday and send them in immediately. So Amanda went through all of the pecan leaf samples in 2018 and 2019. And what she found was that many growers need to be increasing their nitrogen applications. She found that 32% of the samples were low in nitrogen, and then 64% were low using a high standard. So 32% if she used standard, which I'm not sure what number that was. Maybe it was like 100 pounds versus 150. A late summer or fall application of 35 to 45 pounds of nitrogen can be done for a heavy crop. So 70% of the samples in Arkansas were found to be low in potassium. So that's a really high number. I think folks don't really think about potassium a lot in pecans, but it's really important. So if you're talking to growers about fertility, make sure that we're talking about nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus, and zinc. But that's all I have from Amanda. Do y'all have any questions about fertility? I'll try my best to answer them if you do.
Jackie, this is Sean Phillips County. Do you have any input on maybe shocking trees back in production?
Like fertilizing them at a higher rate, Sean?
Yes.
Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, yes.
I don't have any experience with that, but the plant is only going to be able to use what it can use, you know? So I think that you could apply too much, because I mean, there's a calculated amount that it would need. I don't think it can utilize much more than, 200. The most I've ever heard of is like 200, 250 pounds per acre. I think you could go up that high, but I think after that, it would just be kind of wasted.
Okay, all right, gotcha.
But for those that are trying to get orchards back into production, fertilizing, putting out zinc, irrigation in areas where they need to irrigate. I know a lot of places have a lot of groundwater, so that might not be a huge issue, but irrigation is important. And spraying for scab. I don't know how many people call and tell me that they don't manage scab at all. And that's really, really important. And then what's hard is for growers to let go of trees. And I haven't found a good solution to make them feel more comfortable with that. But these older orchards, a lot of them need pruning. The trees themselves need to be pruned, and the whole orchard itself needs to be thinned out, is what I've seen. All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining today. Just real quickly, let me pull back up the schedule. So the next one will be June 8th, and we're going to talk about irrigation management and weed control. So I hope you'll join us again on June 8th. Thanks, everybody.